topic before us is my finance, my priority. Basic assessment. As you want to grow in value, an area you don't want to miss is the area of your finances. So this session, we are going to look briefly at a very important topic before us, my finance, my priority, as we also prepare ourselves to grow in value as women and ladies of value. So this session is going to highlight key sections on four main areas. We will talk about some myths about finances, especially on women. We talk about some money languages. The language of money is important in order to make the best as you can. Then we look at some investment highlights. Then we'll conclude on debt. We'll conclude on debt. So quickly, some myths around finances. Some people think they come from poor families, so they are destined to be poor. They don't have any desire to grow in their finances, to grow in the value of their finances. Some people also blame the economy, thinking that the economy is hard already and the economy is against women and ladies. So they are not able to make the best of their finances. Others also think that they need a high paying jobs before they can invest and grow their money. Some people think investment is only for rich people, and looking at their background, they cannot do much in terms of investment. Others are also of the view that they they are very religious, they believe in the word of God, but sometimes they misconstrue the word of God to think that money is evil. The Bible didn't say money is evil. The Bible even didn't say money is the root of all evil, but it said the love of it, the desire to do anything irrespective of your religious, virtues to make money is what he's talking about when he says money is the root of all evil. So to think that money is evil and the more you have it, the less holy you are is also a myth. Some people also go the extreme of thinking that God will provide. Okay, so they don't need to plan or manage their finances. That is also a myth. And from this discussion, we believe that you'll be able to overcome and debunk all these myths around it. Some people even believe that their families are under a curse of poverty. So no matter what they do, they will always struggle financially. Some young women also think that the source of their finances relies on their parents or their partners. So as long as they are single, they cannot make financial freedom. They are looking forward to getting married to a rich man, so they end their poverty. So these are myths we can avoid by having the right information. And thank God you are connected to have the right information to be able to grow the value of your finances or to grow in the value of your finances. You need to understand the language of money. When you go to the court, in the courtroom, there are certain terminologies, there are certain words they use in the courtroom that the people in the courtroom really understand. So if you want to make money and you don't understand the language of money, you cannot make it. Everywhere you find yourself, in the legal field, in the finance field, even in the medical field, they have their terminologies or their language. You need to learn the language of money in order to be able to earn the way you want. The first language is income. Income, just as the name implies, income, what comes in. What comes in is income. Okay, so what comes in is very important. We need to learn the various sources of income so that if we are lacking any of the sources of income, they can inform us or direct us to be able to look forward to receiving some more income or some more sources of income. So income is what comes in into your accounts, into your pocket at the end of a period. Then we have assets and liabilities. So when you receive income or when you make income, you spend the income on assets or liabilities. So these are money languages or they are money terminologies we need to understand. Assets is what generates income. Liabilities are what reduces your income. Liabilities are things that take money away from you. Assets are things that bring in income. So your mobile phone could be an asset or your mobile phone could be a liability. If you have a smartphone, let's say a Samsung phone, and you have all the required, functionalities of a smartphone on that phone. You can use the phone to post on your social media platforms to advertise your product, to get your products to be sold to people who are even far away from you. This asset or this phone has become an asset because the phone is able to help you to sell your product. But if you have a phone that you don't use to sell your product. You have a smartphone that you can use to sell your product, and you still need another phone, another Samsung or iPhone or any phone that may not add value to your income or add value to your finances. The phone could be a liability. Okay. So a liability is anything that takes money away from you. Debt is also a finance or a money language. Debt means borrowing, monies you have borrowed. And normally we expect you to borrow to make income. So these are four money languages that we have on the screen: income, assets and liabilities, debts, and budget. You need to at least have a strong understanding of these four money languages. So you take each of them and go through them so that you can understand where we are going. Talking about income, we are talking about what comes in. So, what are the sources of income? What are the things that can bring in or cause money to come in, which is known as income? The things you can do to cause money to come into you are many. But before we look at some of the things, we want to look at sources of money. Sources of money. And to understand the sources of money, let's look at two broad areas or two broad sources of income or money. We have the unreliable sources and reliable sources. Unreliable sources are sources that may not be replicated, sources that you may not be able to teach somebody to repeat what you did to also get the same income. So we call them unreliable sources. One unreliable source of income is called begging or being given handouts, begging or being dashed money. And this is somehow very pathetic with our Christian faith, sometimes in the church or in the fellowship where you are. When some people are praying for money, they are only about 50% of their mindset is on hands out, is on monies that have been given out. For example, a young guy, a young lady praying for God to show up in her or his or her finances to pay her school fees. He or she has about 2 months for school to resume, but praying that the school fees of 2,000 will be paid. Part of the mind is saying that he will go to church and somebody will say, "When are you going to school? When you're going to school, come around. Let me give you something." That could be a source of income, but it is not a reliable source of income. With 2 months, you can sell something, you can sell a product or a service, and that can give you the same money you are looking for, but that source of income will be more reliable. So we are saying that begging or being given handouts is not a reliable source of income. Some people also think because of the games around football here and there, they can bet, they can gamble. Betting and gambling is not a reliable source of income, even though it may not be sinful depending on your religious perspective, but it is not reliable because you cannot predict the next time you will win. So it is not a reliable source of income. Another unreliable source of income is stealing or being fraudulent in your activities. Stealing is not reliable because the state frowns at it, religious bodies frown at it, nobody patronize or nobody supports stealing. So even if you are not caught the first time, the second time, it is still not a reliable source of income. The third one, which is very important, is also known as the next source of income, which is also not reliable, is found money. Some people find money on the ground, especially when we're in a village. These days, you cannot even find money on the ground. But some time ago, it was common. So this is not a reliable source of income. Okay. So what are the key reliable sources of income? Something that will cause money to come into your life. And this is universally acceptable, universally repetitive or replicable. You can replicate it anywhere. The first one is employment. The second one is business. The third one is owning assets. And the third one is investment. Employment, business, assets, investment. These are reliable sources. Sometimes, even if you are not born again, sometimes whether you are religious or not, because these are universally acceptable, tried and tested, generationally practiced, and is still valid in our days and will be valid in years to come. These are the key sources of income, things that can cause you to make money. So, talking about let's look briefly at two broad areas of investment. So, investment or income, we are putting them into two broad categories: passive and active source of income. A passive income or income source is when you do not have to exert or when you do not have to involve your energy and your time. A passive source of income runs with your investment without your involvement. So, for example, you can buy treasury bills with a bank, government bonds, and they will give you interest. You can have fixed deposits with a bank, savings and investment funds. You can buy shares in an existing company. A number of companies have listed in Ghana. We have MTN, we have Stanchart, we have GCB. They are all listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. When you buy shares, it means that when they make profit, they give part of the profit to their shareholders, those who hold their shares. Recently, MTN declared a good dividend or a good amount of money for all the shareholders. So with these companies, you don't need to involve yourself in the management of these companies. The regulator, we have somebody known as the regulator, the Ghana Stock Exchange, and then Bank of Ghana. There are certain regulatory bodies to ensure that they will operate very well. So your money is safe. Okay. The regulator will ensure that these companies will publish their financial statement and their financial statement will be audited by an independent body. So when you give money to them, they make profit, you also have your own share. The other source of income, which is not passive, is active source of income. Employment is an active source of income. Trading, buying and selling is an active source of income. Farming is an active source of income. Involving yourself in a trade or a skill like hairdressing, barbering, fashion designing, tailoring, driving Uber or Bolt or taxi, graphic designing using AI, content creation, consulting, starting or running your own business. These are active sources of income. And when you actively involve yourself in them, you will be able to have consistent and reliable source of income. So what we are saying is we can make a reliable source of income through employment, through business, through assets, through investments. And talking about investment, think about whether you are looking at a passive source of income. If you have a property and you are earning rentals on the property, that is a passive source of income. The building will be there, the property will be there at the end of the month or at the end of the year, or if you take your rentals every 2 years, periodically you earn something from the property. So that is a passive source of income. Let's look at another angle of investment options. Another angle of investment options. I was reading Genesis chapter 26 and I came across the story of Isaac and having to bless his children. And I saw that when Isaac wanted to bless Esau, Esau was a hunter whose success depended on what he could catch on a daily basis. On a particular day, if he went to the bush and he did not find any game, he came back empty-handed. But Jacob was a keeper of livestock. He built a system where animals were produced and reproduced. So when a father needed Esau to prepare meat or prepare something for him, so he will bless him, Esau didn't have any system to, to get the animal within a short time. But because Jacob had a number of animals just behind the house, he was able to quickly do that. The key lesson is that we need to learn how to reproduce, how to influence the money we have to produce itself. So thinking about Jacob, I think Jacob will go to the bush and then find a goat. At that time, maybe goats, sheep, cattle, they were still in the bush. But Jacob brought the goat home. Jacob brought a cattle home. Jacob brought some animals home and began to rear them and give them food and help them to produce and reproduce themselves and multiply over time. But Esau didn't do that. If you are a salaried worker, you are a student, and all you need or all you do is that you depend on your parents, whatever they give you, you consume. You depend on your employer, whatever the employer gives you, you consume. You are living your life like Esau. And anytime there is urgent need, you may find yourself wanting. Let's live a life like Jacob, even though we do not support everything Jacob did. If you don't like Jacob, like the fact that he was able to create a system to produce what he wants. So that is a key lesson for us before we look at four key focus areas in investment. The first focus area in investment is known as income generating assets. Remember, I mentioned that there are four key areas of having reliable source of income, and one of them is assets. The asset here is not just assets. There are two types of assets. We have income generating assets, assets that produce income. For example, if you have a shop, I find it difficult to understand how young ladies, they may be doing well with a mobile money, with a small shop in the house. As soon as they get a job that is paying 2,000 a month, a job that is paying 3,000 a month, they close the shop, they close the mobile money shop, they close everything, and now everything is that job. that is paying them what the business can give them in a week, on a good day, what the business can give them in a month, without the stress of going through the trotro every day. I'm not saying that employment is bad, but what I'm saying is, as a young lady, as a young man, even if you are working, is there a possibility of having an income generating asset? If you are the only asset, your skill, your presence is the only asset you have, then you may not be able to enjoy the money you are making. So income generating assets, for example, having a shop, having a vehicle, a young graduate getting a job, earning like 3,000, 4,000. You qualify for a loan of say 50,000, 100,000, and what the person is thinking of is to buy a car for himself, to buy a car for herself. After all, I'm a lady. I don't need to prepare to get married. Somebody will marry me. So why do I need to maybe furnish my room? I can buy a car and look gorgeous outwardly. But this same young lady can have a vehicle that is working for him. That vehicle is known as an income generating asset. So that is very important. So we need to understand that one source of income in terms of assets is income generating assets. The value of these assets is not in the market value. It is not how much if you are selling the car today, you might even get only 50,000 from the car. But in a week, if the car can give you 700, that means in a month, the car is giving you 3,800. That means in a year, the car is giving you over 30,000. So within 3 years, you are getting more than the 70,000 or the 50,000. So the value of income generating asset is not how much you are buying it. It's not how much you are investing in it. It is the ability of that asset to bring you income. That takes us to another type of assets known as value appreciating assets. Value appreciating assets may not give you money periodically, and they are connected to land and properties. A land or a property can help you to gain value over time. For example, land around Oyibi in Accra in 2020 was about 30,000 Ghana cedis. The land had and beyond 30,000 to over 150,000. 2020, the years between 2020 and now is about 5 years. If the land is now 150,000, it means the land has increased by 120,000. If we divide 120,000 by 4 years, it means 30,000 a year. If you divide 30,000 by 12, it means 2,500 a month. So even though if you have a property, if you have a land, if you have any property that is not giving you, regular income, the day you will sell the property, if you work backwards, you'll be able to calculate the implied monthly income from that property. This land I'm talking about, 30,000 being sold today for 150,000. If you work backwards, it's similar to earning 3,000 a month from 2020 to date because you are getting over 120,000 more. That is value appreciating assets. You may be young, you may be in school, but having this knowledge or this information will help you to plan your life as you graduate, as you get married or wherever you find yourself and generating assets. Do I, if you don't have any of these, then you can also plan towards that. In addition to income generating assets and value appreciating assets, we have money or capital markets. Money or capital markets. Money markets for short-term investments, like the treasury bill I mentioned, the fixed deposit I mentioned. These are money markets. So money market is investing with a bank over a short time. Your investments in 3 months, if it's a T bill, a 91-day treasury bill, in 6 months, if it's a 182 days treasury bill. So we call it money market because of the duration. If it's within 1 year, it's called money market security or investment. You can also have what we call the capital market. Capital market is when you invest for a long time, like buying government bonds. You can buy a bond, some of the bonds can go for 5 years, some can go for 10 years. So even as a student, you can buy a bond, go to the bank that you want to buy a government bond, 5 years, because you are in level 100. If you buy a bond for, let's say, 2,000 or even 1,000, by the time you graduate, the value of the bond will be high. The next item we are talking about, which is a subtle form of investment. It's a subtle form of investment because some people don't see it as investment, but it is. And that is personal development. Personal development. You need to develop yourself. When you add value to yourself, you can make more money. When you add value to yourself. Two years ago, that is 2024, I took personal studies on AI for business. So I took courses online on how to use AI, not just the normal chat GPT and writing prompts, but then how to use it to do many things. In 2025, I made over 30,000 cities by training people in AI. I was taken to Nigeria to train African Union, some of their staff on how to use AI. I also trained Ghana National Investment NIB. I also train their staff on AI, and all these companies I train in AI are getting money in addition to the personal one I made. So, to some extent, whatever money I spent in learning the AI was an investment, and I've made 1,000%. I've made thousand, and I'll still make more because of personal development. Personal development. Identify a skill and pursue that skill. These days, you don't even have to go and sit somewhere for somebody to teach you. There are platforms that you can subscribe to and develop yourself. And once you get yourself developed, you can use that development to make money. So personal development is another form of investment. Let's quickly wrap up with debt and borrowing because sometimes we get confused about borrowing and debt. Sometimes we become religious. Yesterday, I went to the market and I saw a young woman who sells banana on a table. She's a squatter. She squats on the roadside. And sometimes I buy from her. So I had a chat with her that what do you need? Because she looks a hardworking lady, always selling my banana. Bananas are few. Anytime I go, just few. Banana you can buy for 100 cedis and everything will be gone. That's what she's selling every day. So in my mind, if she expands it the way she is able to market her product, if she gets a table, she sells on the ground. Okay, so if she gets a table and she gets more banana on the table, she can make more money and pay back. So I have a microcredit organization that I consult for. So I wanted to talk to them and see how she can get a loan and expand her business. I told her about, oh, if you need a loan, we can help you. I know someone who can help you with a loan. Said, God forbid. Like, I reject it. I would never borrow. That I never borrow it. In my mind, I was laughing. It takes me back to the story of the poor widow in Second Kings chapter 4, verse 1 to 7. I'm adding scriptures because sometimes religious people misconstrue the power of loans, the power of debts. And they just say that the Bible says, "Thou shalt not borrow." And they just end there. They don't know that the same Bible told a woman to go and borrow. This woman, let's read the story. A certain woman of the wives of this is directly from the Bible. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my two sons to be slaves." You know, this man, when he was alive, he took a loan. And when he took the loan, he used his two sons as collateral. In those days, slavery was legal. So when you take a loan, you can give your children as collateral. If you fail to pay the loan, children will be taken as slaves. So the man died, and the creditors came to take the sons. And the woman went to the man of God and said, "As I read, my husband is dead. The creditor is coming to take my two sons to be slaves." The husband borrowed money. So there are two types of debts. We have a bad debt and a good debt. I'll come back to the scripture. A bad debt and a good debt. A good debt is used to create income or increase value. A bad debt is for consumption and lifestyle. You have a smartphone just because you need an iPhone. You borrow money to buy an iPhone when you have a Samsung, which can serve almost everything the iPhone can do. That is a bad debt. A bad debt is used for consumption and lifestyle. A bad debt does not generate any income at all. A bad debt is used on food, luxury, spending, unnecessary purchases. Maybe the story we are reading in Second Kings chapter 4 is a bad debt. Maybe the man took the loan for something he didn't need. If he had taken the loan for an investment, for a business that generated income, that income or that business could have paid for the loan. And when he died, his wife could have even continued with the business and pay for the loan. A good debt is used to create income or increase value. So let's go back to the scripture and see what the man of God told the woman. The woman said, "My husband borrowed money, and now I'm at the risk, or I'm at a point of losing my children." In verse 2 of Second Kings chapter 4, Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go, borrow vessels from everywhere." Borrow vessels. What are you talking about? My husband borrowed money she couldn't pay, and you are asking me to also borrow. What an irony. Man of God said, "This borrowing is not a bad debt like your husband's debt. This borrowing is a form of borrowing that can give you income to pay the bad debts. Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons, together with your sons. Let's create a business. Pour into it all those vessels. So she went from him and shut the door and did what the man of God said in verse 7. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt." Sell the oil and pay your debt. The man of God said, "I am not as the religious people who think borrowing is a sin or borrowing is a curse who misunderstand the scriptures when the Bible says, go and borrow vessels. Go and borrow vessels. And when you have made money from the vessels, go and pay the bad debts. There are key lessons we can learn. The lessons we want to learn here is on how to avoid a bad debt. How to avoid a bad debt. To avoid a bad debt as a young lady, a young man, live within your means. Live within your means. Number two, stick to a clear budget. Do you have a budget for yourself? Do you have a budget for your family? Do you have a budget as a married woman? Do you have a budget as a young lady on the campus? Do you just go to the market just to buy things? Have a budget for yourself and stick to a clear budget. You build an emergency fund so that you will not be under pressure to enter into a bad debt. You delay unnecessary purchases if it's possible, just defer them. And at the right time, you can, instead of borrowing to buy another phone just because that is the latest phone, you can delay that unnecessary purchase to avoid a bad debt. You can avoid pressure-driven spending. Pressure-driven spending. And that is also a means to avoid a bad debt. Then know the cost versus the benefit of the debt. Know the cost. Some people, because of pressure, they care less about the details of the debt. They care less about the details of the loan. They just go and acquire the loan, caring little or less about what goes with it. The interest rate, they don't care about it. The duration is also important. You don't have to take a debt that the duration is so short that your current situation, your current financial status will be in jeopardy. So that is important. Then, how do you benefit from a good debt? You borrow only for income generating purposes. I can give you example. In 2018, I got a job in 2016 November. Then 2017, I finished my probationary period, so I qualified for a loan where I was working. My salary at that time was 2,200 cities. Then, together with my brother, I took a loan from the company. We bought a vehicle. My brother was also a driver, so he got somebody to drive the car for me. The car was paying 600 cedis a week. So, on average, 2,400 a month. And I was taking 2,200. So, the bank was taking 900 cedis or 700 cedis for my salary in a month for like 4 years. But because I was getting 2,400, even if the bank takes 900 for my 2,200, at that time, 2,200 is like today's 5,000 or 6,000 cities. So after taking 900, I was still able to live within the remaining, which was about 1,300. So whatever the car was generating was directly going into another investment. So at a point in time, I got used to the 1,300. And that is what I've been doing since then. Every time I have a loan from the bank doing something, then my part of my salary is paid. If my salary is 5,000, I can take a loan that will take 2,000 for my salary. Automatically, you have restricted yourself to saving 2,000. Whatever the bank is taking is more like an investment because their money is also making money for you elsewhere. And the beautiful thing is that you learn to live within what remains. So borrow only for income generating purposes. The vehicle I was talking about, we bought a car somewhere in April. By December, I remember clearly, we bought another car. So in the next year, 2018, I was entering the year with two cars. My salary had not changed, but I had doubled my income from 3,400 extra to 4,800 extra. And my salary was still 2,200. So it tells you that borrowing for income generating purposes is not a bad thing. It is not against the word of God. It's not against the will of God. It's not like God is saying, thou shalt not borrow, but you are borrowing. All the big men, Dangote borrowed money for his refinery. He borrowed over $2 billion from IMF or one of these development banks. All these billionaires, even Elon Musk, is a trillionaire, but he has debt in his portfolio to ensure that the gains outweighs the cost of the debt. Okay. The example I gave, the bank was deducting 900. Even the 900 was not interest. It was interest and principal. They were taking part of the interest, part of the money as interest, and part of the money as principal. So there was a clear path of when the money will be repaid. But the the gains outweighs the cost. The gains outweighs the cost. Today, interest rate for banks is about between 14% to say 19% to 20%. If a professional qualifies for the loan, that professional can take it and also do business with it. One of the things I also learned is that in terms of debt, you borrow what you can make. Borrow what you can make. Do you know what that means? You borrow what, if you lose it, you can even make it. I was earning 2,400, 2,200, which is about 25,000 in a year. So I borrowed 25,000. That means, at worst case, even if I mishandle the 25,000 cities and I lose it, I can make it in a year. So whatever I'm going to do with the 25,000, I don't need it to be successful before I make it. So borrow what you can make. If you can make 30,000 on your own without that business, you can borrow 30,000 with that business. If you can borrow 500,000, then without whatever you are using the money for, you should be able to say to yourself, I can make 500,000. And I got this insight recently, and I compared it to some of the debts I've taken in the past, and I realized that I can make what I borrow, and that is also a very important factor on how to benefit from good debt. Ensure repayment plan is clear before borrowing. I have a friend who borrowed money. He borrowed over 1 million cedis for his business, and he's only paying interest every month. And he ran into debt. He ran into bankruptcy. The reason why he ran into bankruptcy was that because he was paying only interest, there was no clear path on when he will finish paying the loan. So every time he was owing. And even 1% on 1 million is 10,000. But he was paying an average of 6% a month. 6% on 1 million is 60,000. So whether he has money or not, he was paying 60,000 a month. But there was no clear path. There was no clear timing or timeline on when he will be done with the payment of the loan. So don't take a loan that you only pay interest. Ensure that part of the principal is paid so that at least you know when you will finish paying the loan. Then you use debt to expand businesses or to acquire productive assets only. Maintain discipline in cash flow management. Reinvest profit to reduce dependency on borrowing. So you may start with borrowing, but at a point in time, you do reinvestment such that you may not depend so much on borrowing. So to conclude, we've looked at a very important subject on making money or money being your priority. We've looked at some myths around money. We've looked at the money language you need to understand. We've also considered some reliable sources of income as well as unreliable sources of income. Unreliable sources, begging or being given money by people is not reliable. Gambling or betting is not reliable. Stealing or fraud is not reliable. Finding money on the ground is not reliable. Reliable sources of income includes employment, business, assets, and investment. And we take we took a lesson from Jacob and Esau. Jacob or Esau was eating everything he, he gets in a day or in a week, but Jacob did not kill the first goats it caught in the bush. Jacob brought the goat home and ensured that the goat will reproduce itself. Jacob may have found a sheep in the bush and brought the sheep home and ensured that the sheep will produce itself. So when the D-Day came when people had to show what they had within a very short time. Jacob was able to win the contest. Then we said that we have income generating assets, value appreciating assets, money markets, and capital markets. And excitedly, I demonstrated how personal development qualifies to be a form of investment. In conclusion, we've looked at borrowing, and we took a cue from Second Kings chapter 4, the poor widow. The husband had a bad debt, but he had a good debt to clear the bad debt. So we have to ensure that if we are going into borrowing, we go with a clear a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset that debt is bad, borrowing is bad. You go into it to do business, you go into it to clear your issues, to have relief, and ensure that you have a clear payment plan, a clear payment path. You know that the gain outweighs the cost. You know that the profits can be reinvested to reduce the debt along the line. This can really help you. Thank you very much for having me on your platform. I don't take it for granted at all. I'm ready for questions, if any. Thank you.